Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is MichaelAaron Flicker. MichaelAaron is an entrepreneur, behavioral science strategist, founder of the Consumer Behavior Lab, and CEO of XenoPsi Ventures, a brand incubator powering some of America's fastest growing companies. MichaelAaron partners with CEOs and executive teams to apply behavioral science to leadership, culture, and growth, helping organizations unlock performance by better understanding human behavior. A co-author of Hacking the Human Mind, MichaelAaron's work has been featured in Fast Company and other leading publications, and has earned recognition, including NJBIZ's 40 Under 40 and multiple appearances on the Inc. 5000 list. MichaelAaron also hosts the Behavioral Science for Brands podcast, exploring how science and leadership intersect to build stronger teams and organizations. We're excited to have MichaelAaron with us today, where we'll explore how psychological safety can become central to a management philosophy and the leadership behaviors that build trust, accountability, and high-performing teams, especially during times of change, uncertainty, and growth. So excited to have MichaelAaron here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sharlee. Excited to be with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to start in the beginning. What inspired your work in leadership and management? And how did you find that psychological safety is something that becomes central to how you think about building and leading teams?
So I started my company when I was 14 years old as a freshman in high school.
Wow.
And when you start at 14 and you've run the same company for 28 years, it's the only job I've ever had, I found that I am very frequently, for much of my career, the youngest person in the room, whether I was a high school kid or a college kid. And what you learn very early on is that building teams has as much to do with motivating people and making them feel seen and heard and a part of the process as it does about showing them the best answer as quickly as possible. And so now that I'm in the midpoint of my career, I'm no longer the youngest person in the room all the time. Those lessons that you learn in the beginning really feel amplified. So you asked, how did psychological safety become central to how I've been building teams? And in a lot of ways, you find that you can put together amazing teams of people. Technology allows us to bring together people from different parts of the globe, from different industries, and you bring great people together, and sometimes you don't get great outcomes. And that's a really vexing problem. How do you solve this issue of not just bringing all the right skill sets together, but how do you enable those skill sets to get to the best answers? And to me, that's where psychological safety has become such a critical concept. For me, it has been a big concept for the last 15, 20 years. Maybe it was a bigger concept before then, but when I first came in, it just made so much sense to me and my management style. How do we create teams where everyone feels they can contribute? And when you have the right culture set, then the skill sets can really do great work.
Wow. So first of all, it's quite impressive that you started a business at 14 as a freshman in high school. I don't even want to say publicly what I was doing at 14 as a freshman in high school. So that is quite impressive. And to see that you have been able to grow your business and earn so many accolades over the course of its, over 20 years is quite impressive. So my hat's off to you for that.
Thank you.
I do want to dig a bit deeper. So when I hear psychological safety, it's one of those types of terms that is used, and I've heard it before, but I want to dig deeper into what that really means. Like, what does that look like in practice? So not just like the concept of it, but what is something that leaders can really actually observe on a team, and so they know that their other people on the team have this psychological safety. What does it look like?
Absolutely. So I think psychological safety gets a bad rap in pop culture, and it has got this bad branding associated with it.
Yeah.
If you never use the term psychological safety, but you go into most C-suites and you ask, do we want to have a culture where every person feels empowered to speak up, say what they believe, and drive selflessly to the best outcomes? I think 9 out of 10 boardrooms in America are going to say, let's hire that team, let's have that culture. You give it a title like psychological safety, and now it starts to come with baggage, but that's to me what it means. But that's what it is as a concept. You asked, what does it mean to actually observe it?
Yeah.
Here's something I always look for when I get into one of the companies that I own and I'm sitting with the teams that are working. I always listen for how fast does the idea get separated from the person that came up with it. So you're in a room, you're in a brainstorm, and somebody says an idea, and then the leader says, Jenny, that's a great idea. Let's debate Jenny's great idea. Versus, Jenny, wow, that's lovely. Okay, the idea on the floor is X. Let's debate it. And the sooner you drive a wedge between the person whose idea it was and the idea itself, the more able you are to talk about the positives and the negatives. You're talking about the effect that it's going to have on the business problem rather than, well, Jenny's my friend that I'd like to go out to lunch with on Thursday, so I want to support her and make sure Jenny looks good in front of her bosses, or make sure that we all are being nice and kind to one another. And all that distracts from the goal of doing great work. So number one, look for that separation. And if you're a leader, think about how often you're actually praising someone rather than focusing on the idea. How quickly can we make everybody feel like all that matters is the right idea? So that would be big idea number one. And I would say big idea number two is, how do you create a culture that you and your leaders are making the example that everybody else can follow? So in high psychologically safe teams, one person can raise an idea, another person can raise the contra of the idea, the opposite, and that's seen as positive dialogue back and forth. It's celebrated when multiple different angles are talked about and debated. And you're not going to find that in a mid-level or lower level of the organization if the senior leaders aren't doing that. So big thing number two, you want to look at your senior most people, make sure they're exhibiting high psychological safety, and then that can then trickle through the organization.
Gotcha. Makes complete sense. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that this has been an idea of yours for, 20 years now, psychological safety. And over a decade ago, actually, you mentioned that maybe it's something that has been out there, maybe it hasn't, but Google actually did a study on this, Project Aristotle, back in, I think, 2012. And it showed that psychological safety mattered more than talent or experience, which I thought was really kind of crazy when I read it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that safety is what unlocks everything else and allows teams to work the best together?
So the study at Google with Project Aristotle was asking, how do we build great teams? And so they studied over 180 teams, and they looked at a lot of different angles of what was contributing to the success of the team. And was it seniority? Was it they had more programmers? They had more data analysts. So they asked about skill set. They asked about seniority. They asked about, does it matter if everybody speaks the same language on the teams? They asked all these angles. And as you say, Sharlee, psychological safety was the number one most important attribute that came up. After that, just for everyone listening, dependability, clarity, meaning, and purpose. So it's not just psychological safety. It's not like this is the panacea. But if you are looking for what you can do to give your teams the best chance of meeting their goals, the most important attribute there is psychological safety. And I went looking in preparation for our talk today so that's interesting. Google did the study 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Are there more recent studies that either prove or maybe take a little bit of a critique of psychological safety? And I just brought two that I thought you would find interesting. Okay. 2024, Boston Consulting Group does a survey of 28,000 employees in 16 countries. They run a similar test to what Google did, and they find psychological safety remained the top driver of team success, and it was particularly effective at improving workplaces for women, people of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged groups. And this is important because the other side of psychological safety that folks can miss is it's not just about having great psychological safety, it's also about having high cognitive diversity. So if you think about it plotted on a chart, you want to have left to right, right side meaning high psychological safety, and maybe low to high on the y-axis, you want to have high cognitive diversity. And so then the question is, well, what is cognitive diversity? Cognitive diversity is the desire to have people with different points of view. Some folks that are introverts and some parts that are extroverts. Some folks that dream in English, other folks that dream in other languages. And if you all wake up where I am in New York City, everybody wakes up in Brooklyn and everybody takes the train over to Lower Manhattan and everybody goes to lunch in the same places, very unlikely you're going to have that cognitive diversity that's going to bring great ideas to the table. So whatever the listeners' reactions were to it being effective at improving workplaces for people of color, LGBTQ employees, people with disabilities, that's how we get more cognitive diversity into a team. It has to be people with different backgrounds, different lived experiences. And when you bring those people together, that's how you get better and bigger ideas. So I'm interested in cognitive diversity, as a social mandate. I think we should have companies that are inclusive of all people, but one, because it makes better work. And so if we can drive better work while we do that, it's really important. So that's one of the studies. I can go into the second if you're interested, but I just wanted to get that idea out on the table for everybody.
Gotcha. And I am interested in the second one, but you brought up what I was going to talk about next. So I want to get it while we're here.
Go ahead.
Cognitive diversity. And so I'm thinking, I agree with you. So it works out best in my mind if you have people from different all walks of life and we're coming together to share our ideas, because I don't know what you know, MichaelAaron. I am in North Carolina. I am a social worker. I see the world in a different place than you do. However, what I want to look at is the opposite side of that, being devil's advocate here. I know there are people that say, well, if we all think differently, is that not going to cause some level of friction in the team? So how does looking at or incorporating diversity, how do we work past any potential friction? How does that work together?
We want to call this creative friction, and we want to see it as positive friction.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you get all the guys from the local Catholic high school to all come and work on the same company, it's going to be easier for them to start teams faster. That's for sure the case. The question is, while they may start faster and while they may be able to shortcut some of the initial bonding that's required in a high-performing team, think of that old adage, forming, norming. The way you build a high-performing team, they're going to get through that initial phase easier, but studies will show that they do not create better output at the end. So when you have the wide range of cognitive diversity we're talking about, not all English speakers in the same room, not all people from the same geography in the room, you're going to go slower to build the bonds of a high-performing team, but you will yield better outputs because of it. And so you're right that pushback, Sharlee, I think is legitimate. It does create friction when you start building these teams. But that's why psychological safety is so important. It's not about Sharlee's idea or MichaelAaron's idea. It's about who can come up with the best idea to solve the problem, who can come up with the smartest way to answer the question, who can come up with the best way for the team to move forward. And now that it's divorced of my persona, we can debate them, challenge them, and just and look to commit to the best idea that's going to move the project forward. And you've heard people say this. This has been true in my own career. The really greatest ideas, it's hard to remember who came up with them because they were a product of the team together. No one owns the whole idea by themselves. So is that responsive?
It is, because that's exactly what I was wondering. I know that certain people, like you said, if we all are from the same place, then we can get along a lot easier, and it's great. But then you do leave out that the idea that everybody brings their own perspective to the table, and having a diverse option of ideas, no matter where that idea comes from, but having a diverse option of those ideas of people looking at the world in a completely different way is going to hopefully lead you towards more progress on your team, more productivity for your company. Absolutely. When I hear psychological safety, I think culture, right? As a social worker, I deal a lot with the culture of the people, the businesses that I've worked in. Currently am in a dialysis clinic. And so a lot of the job that I do now is helping to improve the culture, not just with my coworkers, the staff members there, but also with the patients. So how is psychological safety different than culture, or are they the same? Do they work together? Like what does that look like in practice in a company?
So I think psychological safety is a expectation of how we ask for every worker to show up, that they are going to bring the best ideas to the table. And in exchange for putting their very best thinking, the barter back in the company is that you do not get judged personally on any one idea, or or if you push, the expectation is if you think you're getting direction that's going to be a waste of time, if you get a direction that you think is not good for the company, it's your job to speak up. And in exchange, we create a culture where you're safe to do that and you're encouraged to do that. So to me, that's what I would call a part of culture, but it's not all of culture. I would call it the employee barter. That's the way we want to work together. Culture, lots of books written about culture. We could probably do hours on culture. I would say that in its most base form, it's value and conduct alignment. And if you think about culture as being clear on the values that you want to have in any organization, and then you live those values, that would be the conduct alignment part. When those two things are in sync, that's what your culture is. And that's why you hear so many talking heads, so many LinkedIn videos, so many other podcasts say, culture is what your boss allows to happen. Culture is not what they say at the company meeting. It's when everybody shows up 5 minutes late, then, or more importantly, the CEO shows up 5 minutes late. Well, then I guess everybody can show up 5 minutes late, right? I mean, that's not conduct alignment. We want to live the values that we preach. And when you have alignment between value and conduct, that's where you make culture. And where you have a misalignment, conduct will trump value. So what you allow to have happen, that's what's going to define the culture. And I personally would push for us to have psychological safety as a big barter that folks have with their employees, the part of the culture they want to build.
Speaking of values, how can leaders help people clearly see their value that they bring to a team? And then I wonder if there's a difference there in the creation of the team, helping people to see that value from the very beginning. And then is there some level of remediation needed if your company comes in and tries to assist them in creating a better culture, better team environment there? Like how do leaders help their teammates, their team members to see the value they bring, especially environments where confidence, their voice, their belonging might not be even. You might see somebody on a lower level, but you still need their input just as much as you need the higher level CEO.
I'm a person that first and almost usually goes to academic studies or research I've read. On this answer, Sharlee, I'm just going to share my lived experience.
Okay.
My lived experience is that folks don't quit companies, they quit managers.
Mhm.
They leave their direct boss. And so if you want folks that are working in a company to feel the value that they are bringing, the first and most important person that can do that is their direct manager. And so the health of companies often is in the strength of their management and leadership programs, or the way that they teach acknowledging people's contribution, creating a culture of gratitude, and by creating the feedback, the expectation that it's the manager's job first. So first and foremost, if we want people to feel valued, their bosses need to tell them that they are valued. And I think for most white collar workers, if they are not doing the job that they want, number one thing on exit surveys often is, I didn't know I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do. So it's incumbent on the manager to be clear about what great looks like and how we can help get you to great. The other thing, which I believe in the last 10 years, I've seen so much more progress in this area, is employees can advocate for each other. Meaning it is not management versus employees, but it is employees helping one another solve problems, do great work, and not only being thought of working within the reporting lines. So, it's this mindset of the pie's only so big. There's only going to be 2 promotions this year. So I've got to compete against you to get my promotion, versus an abundance mindset where we can say the whole pie can grow. If the company does great, there'll be more promotions for everyone. That abundance mindset is what your leadership teams want. It's what the C-suite believes, but it's so hard to build that in the culture at the company unless you're explicit about it. So number 2, I would say we need to be explicit that abundance mindset, the idea that everyone can do well, helping one another, is the other great way for people to feel valued, because they can then see how what they're doing helps make an impact at the company and in their own careers.
Okay. And do you believe that location, does that impact value? So especially with a lot of more people doing work from home or connecting with people in other countries, or even the introduction of AI, how do those things change value and how team members experience being valued?
I would say that in the CEO rooms, I spend time with other owners and CEO colleagues. The prevailing idea is that proximity matters. Those that show up in the office and don't work from home are more valuable. And I think that gets a part of the insight right, but I think it misses the much bigger idea. So I think the part of the insight it gets right is that those that push for themselves to continually improve, those that have the mindset they always want to get better, should be the ones that we celebrate and promote in companies. Continuous improvement is always going to be a very highly sought after character trait. I think what it misses is that the best way to do that is by showing up in the office. You can be someone dedicated to continuous improvement. You could be someone who's always trying to make themselves better. But if you don't have the ability to get into that office, whether that's because you live in a different geography or because you have a mobility limitation, you have to work harder to make sure that your efforts are seen and they're recognized. I don't know if that means over communicating on your instant messaging channels. I don't know if that means making sure you always have your camera on in a virtual environment, but there's ways to signal your intent even if you're not in the room, in person, physically. And I would say you should never miss that there's a lot that you can learn and grow from at the outside edges of the actual meeting. So virtual communication happens when we set a meeting on a calendar, we all open our laptops, and we have the Zoom or the Google Meet or the Microsoft Teams meeting open. But when that closes, there's more work that happens. There's more thinking that advances. And so you want to have a way to be a part of that if you're not going to be physically in the office. We made the decision at my group of 9 companies to be a fully distributed workforce. It works great for us. We have 9 different companies, over 115 people, everybody working distributed. But that's a commitment we've made as a set of companies. The question is, how does it work for you in your career, in your company? And you just have to be thoughtful about those things.
Gotcha. Do you feel like the lack of proximity impacts how teams can be built more effectively? Does it negatively impact the communication levels? But then also taking into account folks that really do enjoy working from home. Like, how does that change the atmosphere? So my husband works from home every day, and I honestly think he might be more productive in the house than he was in his office. And then there's the commute time and the work chatter and all that other stuff. So how does all of that play into the culture, the value, psychological safety? Like, how does all of those variables play into it?
2 things come to mind. On the one hand, if you're going to have hybrid teams, meaning some folks are in an office physically and some folks are distributed for whatever the reasons we've talked about, even more intentionality has to go into keeping the circles connected, finding ways to make sure everybody is intentionally working together in that hybridized space. So I think one, if you're going to have hybrid environments, you need to set culture, create the right conditions for folks to work together without one side feeling disabled versus the other. You've also heard the inverse of that story, Sharlee, where people come into an office, but the boss is maybe in a different location and say, why am I coming into an office? My boss isn't here. It works both ways, that we have to create hybrid environments, and not just when the bosses are in and the staff are not. That's on the one side. And Sharlee, on the other side, for me, I would say teams that don't have proximity have to ask, what are the ways they're going to find to recognize one another, see one another, award one another. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like planned fun. So if you're going to do it and you have to have a gratitude moment, that's great. There's a great Danish, I think it's Danish expression, fika, where you take the time 5 minutes at the start of the meeting to just chit chat before the agenda starts. You need to find that way to build culture when you don't have proximity. And because it's not everyone in one office, you just have to be a little more planful and a little thoughtful about that.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Americans are increasingly concerned about mental health, with nearly 9 in 10 voters seeing it as a crisis. Mental Health First Aid provides crucial training to identify, understand, and respond to mental health and substance use challenges. Gain the skills and confidence to offer life-saving assistance. We offer courses for individuals, groups, and organizations of all sizes, including specialized training for veterans, law enforcement, EMS, and educators. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org or email hello@mentalhealthfirstaid.org to schedule your training and make a difference in your community.
Absolutely. And taking that even a step further, AI has become it's emerging. It is everywhere. Many companies use it. I use Google Gemini on my phone. I help my child with his homework as well as things for work. We use it all the time. As that becomes something that is more mainstream, how is it affecting psychological safety or even the ability to build good teams? How it impacts people's ability to adapt and to be able to learn new ways to do the same jobs, the same things that they're working on. How does that affect that ability to have psychological safety on a team?
I'm very positive about this change that's happening in the workforce. I think there's a lot of surveys that would point to the friction we're going through right now. There was a quantum workplace study that came out earlier last year that those who frequently use AI experience 45% more burnout compared to their peers that do not. There was an S&P Global study that came out that said the proportion of organizations abandoning AI due to employee pushback jumped from 17% to 42%. So there's a lot of negativity in, let's say, the business trade press about AI and its effect on employee engagement and, in effect, psychological safety. Carnegie Mellon has a professor named Anita Woolley, and she came up with the co-human framework. And it proposes that AI agents can act as glue between humans. It can summarize meetings. It can capture team member input, and it has to be operated under human direction. To me, that's starting to get at the level of AI integration that we can all see, which is that there are manual tasks that can be lessened by having AI be a partner. But it gets to a deeper question about what types of workers that we want to have at our companies. And if you were going to MBA school, if you were going to grad school in the 1990s, there was a lot of talk about I-shaped employees. These employees that have just amazing depth of knowledge. Not only did they have a high school interest, they went to college, they went to grad school, they had a PhD in one thing. And much of the 2000s and 2010s were focused on T-shaped employees, those that have a broad knowledge about a lot of things, and yet still that I remains, a capital T if you're imagining it, a depth in a single area. And what I would argue is that as we continue to evolve, we want more X-shaped people, folks that can move between computer and human interfaces and be more flexible in their learning agility. They have the ability to work back and forth between working with humans and working with computers or machines in a much more fluid way. And when you have those types of people, then you celebrate where we can cut down repetitive tasks and where we can use machines to do more so that we're more free to do the things only humans can do. And so I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking to see how AI can be celebrated because it frees us up to do the things only uniquely human can be done. And that's really exciting.
It is. And I like the way that you look at that, because I kind of have the same idea about it. Like AI is there to help us. I don't really see it as it's going to just, take over and be this, superhuman process, because I think we can use it in the way that we interface with other humans, taking away those like mundane tasks that many of us, I don't want to take the notes in the meeting. I really don't enjoy that part. I don't want to do that. I would prefer to have Gemini take them for me, or, ChatGPT or whatever your AI process is, or using those tools to make an everyday process, combing through my emails, a lot easier so that I can really do the real work that I am here to do. And so I really see it as AI changing maybe even team dynamics there, or does it change dynamics or leadership expectations? So not just in productivity, but you also mentioned the changes that employees may have in trusting in computer systems. I know I personally work with some people that are all about AI type things, and others that are like this. I'm not doing this. I'm not giving this computer any more of my information. I don't trust it. How can we collaborate with something that isn't even real? So what does that look like? How is it changing dynamics in businesses today?
So I think first big thought that I've had on this topic is, if you think of any employee or any team member as an iceberg, you get hired for the very tip of the iceberg. Do you have the skills to do the job that we hired you to do? But as you go deeper, what's underneath the water, what's that quote about icebergs? 10% is above the waterline, 90% is below. So in the 90% below, there's really three layers that matter in this topic. One is what we would call enablers. These are the uniquely human skills and traits that make you better at your job. So some people are just naturally better at math. And so when they have a skill set that aligns with that, they're going to be faster and more creative in how they solve math problems. Same thing for those that have a skill, a natural born ability in music or in creativity, and so on. So enablers, the uniquely human skills that we bring, it's the first layer. A little bit layer than that is this agile learning mindset, the ability to learn and adapt to market changes. And that's really a big part of the iceberg, because you can have a preconceived notion of what we should do with machines, or what we can allow a machine to do rather than a human. But what's certain is 2030 is going to look a lot different than 1930. And as we continue to progress, we have to continue to adapt what we think. So that agile learning mindset is really critical. But then at the very bottom of the iceberg is what we would call identity. And identity is at the base that makes everything else work. And that's the question to have: how resilient or how adaptive is your identity? If you say you're no good at singing, well, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to be on America's Got Talent, right? That's your identity at the very bottom of the iceberg. Before you ever test it out, before you ever take a lesson, but if you say I'm never going to lose weight, that's really deep at the bottom. I'm a person that can't lose weight. I'm a person who, very dangerous. Whatever you say after that, that's really getting to what drives people's fears and excitement about technology, about AI. So on the one hand, I would say you've got to look at that iceberg, those four layers: skills, then enablers, then mindset, and then identity. You look at all four of those and you ask, how are we hiring people that have a resilient and adaptive identity, who embrace an agile learning mindset, who have the uniquely human skills and traits to use them for the skills we hired them for. So that to me feels like a really critical part of getting to using AI in a positive way.
Absolutely. Because you have to have that leadership change to be able to hire the people that are going to accept the changes that are going to happen. I mean, it is inevitable at this point in our existence that change is happening, maybe more rapidly than was before, but change is happening there. Digging even deeper into AI, how do leaders look at or think about accountability? So taking credit for AI assisted work. I know I use AI to write letters or to create even scripts for podcasts or any of that. So how do leaders look at that, or even owning mistakes? AI is not perfect. You should still review it, and then using it as a tool rather than just a substitute for judgment. How do leaders think about, AI in terms of accountability?
There is a well-studied human bias called the illusion of effort. And this illusion of effort is a tricky thing. I wrote a book called Hacking the Human Mind, and it goes into the illusion of effort as one of these psychological insights that really affects the way that we look at things. And the basic concept here is that we will rate things more positively when we think there's been more effort put into them. And this is a famous study, 2015, by two professors, Buell and Kim. And here's the study that they did. They said some diners go into a cafeteria and they split them into two groups. Some diners can't see the food being prepared in the kitchen. And then a second set of diners could see the food being prepared at the kitchen. Those who couldn't see the food gave it a rating of 4.57. Same exact food that comes out of the kitchen. Those who could see the cooks making the food in the kitchen gave it an average rating of 5.49. That's a 20% improvement just by seeing the cooking that's occurring. So how does that relate to AI? The problem with AI is that people don't think you worked very hard to get your answer. And that human bias that if you really took a lot of energy and effort, if you really poured over it, it must be higher quality, is exactly that. It's an illusion. But it is a bias that all people, bosses, coworkers, spouses, everybody carries that bias with them. And so it's our job when we use AI to make sure we really show how much effort and skill went into the prompt engineering that created the AI output, or how much oversight we had of the AI outputs before we gave it to you. So the human control of the machine is what you should focus on when you use AI, because that's what's going to get credit by other humans in evaluating your work. Whether it is better or worse work is up to what's actually being produced. But to get credit for that work, to not get unfairly cast as not trying or not doing enough work, to me, it's about that illusion of effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. So we kind of moved around a bit. So we started talking about psychological safety, what it is, dug a little bit into values, culture, AI stuff, creating the team. How do you create that team based on all of these things that we know, based on finding those folks that have a certain level of adaptability, a high level of learning agility, being able to, connect those values with conduct, create a positive culture, a productive culture? How do you put all of that together to create a productive team?
I would say first, you want to get your C-suite or your leadership team in any organization to buy in and believe that this is the model that creates great teams. And there's lots of great books and lots of great management systems that will teach you versions of this. So we want everybody at the leadership level to buy into one way that we're going to do this. And you see great organizations that set great strategic direction have the buy-in of the whole leadership team to start. And then if you build a company's culture around psychological safety, you are seeding, you're accepting better, you're asking to be a continuously improving organization, because you're asking for your staff and every person that's in the company to help keep bringing the best ideas to keep making the company better. So you need to have the culture to celebrate them, recognize them, reward them, so that everybody knows that it's not just a vision of the leadership team, but it's in every day and every practice. That goes back to the idea that we said earlier, that we're looking to have not just great values, but we're looking to have conduct alignment with those values. So if we could do those two things, I think we have a really great chance of building companies that have engaged workforces that really are excited to come and work and do great things every day.
Very nice, very nice. So as we come to a close, MichaelAaron, for those listeners who want to go deeper into your thinking, I know that you have your book, Hacking the Human Mind. You also are on podcast host, Behavioral Science for Brands podcast, and even more of your work around leadership and behavioral science. Where can folks learn more? Tell us a bit about your book as well.
Thank you so much. So the book is called Hacking the Human Mind, and you can find it at www.hackingthehumanmind.com. And on that website, you'll learn about the book, and the 20-second summary is we are interested in the psychological insights that power brands and why we buy what we buy. And so for those that are interested in how psychology applies to and behavioral science applies to how we buy, that's the book for you. And you can learn about it. We look at 17 of the world's best brands, and we understand and we analyze the psychology that they were using to make great marketing. But to learn more about me and the work that I do, consulting with organizations and with companies, www.theconsumerbehaviorlab.com. And on that website, it's part of this. You'll see it also on the book. You can meet our team, contact us for consultings and trainings, and just learn more about how to build great companies.
Awesome, awesome. Well, MichaelAaron, I have really appreciated you speaking with us today. This has been a great conversation.
Sharlee, thanks so much for having me. Hope everybody finds it helpful at home.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. And if you like our show, make sure to give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.